everything is going to hell down here in Texas.
What's up, everybody? This is your boy, Big Bad Bob, with you here for episode number 220 of the Lone Gunman Podcast. Welcome back to the show, everyone. And here at the top, I would encourage everyone to head over to Twitter and follow me at the Lone Gunman 7 if you'd like to stay abreast of everything the Lone Gunman Podcast. And also, you can check out the YouTube channel. Just search for the Lone Gunman Podcast. Make sure to subscribe and like and share with your friends. That'd be awesome. And please feel free to leave a review wherever you listen to this podcast. That would be greatly appreciated. So, today on the show, we're going to do a potpourri, somewhat of a quick hit style here on the Lone Gunman Podcast. That's right. And make sure you're checking out Quick Hits, a JFK assassination news and notes podcast as well. You can find it wherever you're listening to this show. I do it with my buddy Doug Campbell from the Dallas Action Podcast. And it's probably better than this show. I will say that. But anyway, it's a good show. And if you like this one, you'll like that one. Pretty simple, folks. So we're going to start out here with some quick tidbits and pieces of the puzzle and quick little things that I thought were interesting that I've been collecting over the past couple months or so. And then we are going to get into a little deeper. Eyewitness Malcolm Summers, who was in Dealey Plaza on November 22nd, 1963, and really do a deep dive into seeing what he had to say that he saw and what he heard. And we will analyze Malcolm Summers. But first, let's get into some of the more kooky and interesting things. So we'll start it off kooky. Okay, kooky. All right, this is I will say this is kooky. It's an interview that Richard Popkin did with the Sacramento Bee. And of course, Richard Popkin is the author of the book, The Second Oswald. Okay. Popkin told the Bee that he has documents naming the killer of Kennedy, describing the mechanism of the plot, and pinpointing the agents involved, and showing that Lee Harvey Oswald did not operate alone, folks. He said he has wired U.S. Attorney General Edward H. Levi, offering to deliver the documents to him at his convenience, but has received no response. Skipping through here. Many of the documents obtained by Popkin relate to a former U.S. Army captain named Richard Case Nagel, who claims to have been a CIA agent prior to the assassination. Nagel has been located by Popkin, who said he has interviewed him at length. In one communique with Levi, Popkin said, If granted immunity, Richard Case Nagel will testify to a meeting in September 63 that Oswald attended with two fake Cuban G2 intelligence agents in Jackson Square, New Orleans, who were in fact members of the violence-prone faction of the CIA finance group operating in Mexico City. At the meeting in New Orleans, Popkin asserted the assassination of Kennedy was discussed. Nagel entered an El Paso bank on September the 20th, 1963, and fired a gun into the ceiling. Then he sat outside waiting to be arrested by federal authorities. He later claimed that it was a ruse to give him an alibi for the day the assassination originally was to have taken place, which was September the 26th, 1963. The incident got him a stiff and unexpected prison sentence, though. Nagel also claimed he sent a letter to FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover outlining the plot to kill Kennedy in September 63, 2 months prior to the assassination. Popkin told the Bee he has the FBI file number on that letter. He also has copies of Nagel's letter to the Warren Commission and copies of Nagel's correspondence with two senators, including Edward Kennedy. The documents that name the actual killer are from a source totally unknown to you. One of the killers was interrogated under hypnosis for 90 hours. And I have tapes of the interrogation, Popkin said. He has been wiring Levi, he said, because President Ford said in his most recent press conference that Levi was handling the problem. Popkin's latest telegram, which he said he was going to send this morning, reads, I have documents indicating that U.S. intelligence agencies had a laboratory producing robot murderers, Manchurian candidates, and at least one of them took part in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. One of the robot murderers is still at large, Popkin claims in the telegram. Popkin characterized his wire as a gentle message. Popkin is a professor at Washington University in the history of philosophy and the history of Judaism. He wrote The History of Skepticism from Erasmus to Descartes and 8 other books of history of philosophy, and co-director of the International Archives of the History of Ideas. I'm assuming they give you all those credentials so you don't think that he's a outright Looney Tune. Many of the documents obtained by Popkin relate to former U.S. Army Captain Richard Case Nagel, who claims to have been a CIA agent prior to the assassination. If granted immunity, Popkin said, Richard Case Nagel will testify to a meeting in September of 63 that Oswald attended in New Orleans. So, yeah, there's that. And then we have this weird David Ferry tidbit that I saved for some reason. It says this, however, it was learned that Ferry was receiving money in a rather unusual way. On January 8th, 1967, he gave the mechanic instructions pertaining to a package to be found in a white car, which would be without a license plate and would be waiting in front of the airport administrative building. Underneath the front seat, the mechanic found a bulging brown envelope sealed with Scotch tape. Ferry took it from him, went to the men's room, returned with a satisfied air, and mentioned that he was considering buying a new car. Although Ferry, to all intents and purposes, was unemployed at the time, except for part-time investigative work for a lawyer, an examination of his bank account at the Whitney National Bank revealed that during the 3-week period prior to the president's assassination, he had deposited a total in 1963 money, $7,093.02. A few months after the assassination, Ferry suddenly acquired a large service station. He apparently ran it much the same way he maintained his apartment. On one occasion, he had just filled the gas tank of an acquaintance and he waved him away, turning down payment for the gas. Oh, forget it. The government's paying for it anyway, he said. You gotta love David Ferry, folks. You gotta love him. Got to love him. Mr. Krieger, FBI, December 4, 1963, confirmed that the subject is the daughter of William Avery Hyde. Krieger was furnished a copy of two 1957 investigative reports on William Hyde for lead purposes only, and was confirmed that William Hyde was under consideration, for a covert use by this agency in Vietnam, but was not used. This information had previously been obtained from Oscar Sells' CI SIG. And this is, of course, a CIA document pertaining to Ruth Payne's father. Now, we all know that Ruth Payne's sister was an administrative assistant, with the CIA, whatever that may be. But this CIA document clearly states that her father was under consideration for covert use in Vietnam in 1957. So, not out of the realm of possibility, that they weren't possibly thinking of using her in 1963 or 1962. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, that part. Let's see. Next up, we got something we've been talking about here on the show recently. And this is a document, I believe FBI document. United States Attorney Barefoot Sanders, Dallas, Texas, telephonically advised Special Agent Kyle Clark, no relation to me, on December the 5th, 1963, that a reporter for the Dallas Morning News, name unrecalled, had advised him that four of the women working in the society section of the Dallas Morning News were reportedly standing next to Mr. Zapruder when the assassination shots were fired. According to this reporter, those women, names unknown, stated that the shots, according to their opinion, came from a direction other than from the Texas School Book Depository building. Shocker. Mr. Barefoot Sanders also advised that the reporter calling stated he had interviewed a patrolman, J.M. Smith, who advised that he definitely distinguished the aroma of gunpowder down near the underpass. Patrolman Joseph M. Smith of the Traffic Division, Dallas Police Department, Dallas, Texas, on December 9th advised Special Agents Henry Oliver and Lewis Kelly that he was working on November 22nd, 1963, on traffic at Elm and Houston Streets. He stated he was near the parking lot when the shots were fired, which killed President Kennedy. The shots echoed so loudly he had no idea at the time where they had been fired from, but stated he did smell what he thought was gunpowder. But stated this smell was in the parking lot by the School Book Depository building and not by the underpass. He advised he never at any time went to the underpass and could not advise if there was the smell of gunpowder in the underpass. He stated he did not see the president when he was shot and stated he saw nothing which would assist in this matter. After the shots were fired, there was a great deal of confusion, and he left his post for a few minutes to go to the area where the president had been shot, but did not go in the School Book Depository building. Well, there you go. You have Officer Joe Smith, who ran up to the grassy knoll after shots were fired. He encountered the fake Secret Service agent and smelled gunpowder on the grassy knoll. Yeah, that part. All right. Next up, we have a sheriff's department affidavit from a Mr. J.C. Price. Okay. Now, he states that this day at about 12:35, I was on the roof of the Terminal Annex building on the corner of Northeast Houston Street when the presidential motorcade came down Main to Houston and then west on Elm. The cars had proceeded west on Elm and was just a short distance from the triple underpass when I saw Governor Connolly slump over. I did not see the president as his car had gotten out of my view under the underpass. There was, however, a volley of shots. I think 5, and then much later, maybe as much as 5 minutes later, another one. I saw one man run towards the passenger cars on the railroad siding after the volley of shots. This man had a white dress shirt, no tie, and khaki-colored trousers. His hair appeared to be long and dark, and his agility running could be about that of a 25 or 30-year-old man. He had something in his hand. I couldn't be sure, but it may have been a headpiece. That means a hat. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. You're too kind. Thank you. Where's my clapping? Okay, that's not it. Can't win for losing. But in all seriousness, you wonder, with all these witnesses of people, ear witnesses who heard shots from the knoll, eyewitnesses who went up to the knoll and searched around, encountered these fake Secret Service agents or fake members of authority, including cops. And things that people saw going on behind the fence in the railroad yard, just can't be denied. I mean, everybody didn't make this shit up. You know what I mean? All right, next up, we have an FBI memo to Mr. Clyde Tolson, Hoover's little bitch, and it was from Alan Belmont, another one of Hoover's little bitches. And this is from November 22nd, 1963, folks, the day of. I talked to Special Agent Shanklin in Dallas. He said arrangements have been made with Carswell Air Force Base to fly one of our agents up to Washington with the rifle that was recovered by the police, together with the fragments of the bullet taken from Governor Connolly and the cartridge cases. I told Special Agent Shanklin that, quote, the Secret Service had one of the bullets that struck the president and the other is lodged behind the president's ear. And we are arranging to get both of these. I told him to notify us when the gun will reach Washington so we can have the lab standing by. Let me read that again. Secret Service had one of the bullets that struck President Kennedy, and the other is lodged behind the president's ear. So what in the hell happened to that bullet, folks? I told Shanklin it appeared the rifle was highly important, particularly as Oswald is making no admissions, and leads should be set out to immediately check this rifle as well as the telescopic sight. Shanklin said this was being done. I told Shanklin to also see if the police want us to make a ballistics test on the pistol which shot the police officer, and if so, to forward the pistol and the bullets to us for examination. I told Shanklin if the police don't want to release the pistol to us, he should find out all about it, that is, the make, caliber, and how many bullets were fired, etc. Shanklin said that he realized that it was extremely important to locate and interview the co-workers of Oswald and any people that knew him in order to account for his whereabouts and actions, and he said this is being done. I told Shanklin that President Johnson has been in touch with the director and wants to be sure we are on top of this case and is looking into the FBI solving the case and is looking to the FBI to solve the case. It is therefore imperative that we do everything possible in this case. Shanklin understood. Shanklin was advised that we are sending out another teletype to all offices instructing that any allegations or leads pertaining to the assassination must be run out of an urgent basis, and the Bureau and Dallas Office of Origin advised. So, that's interesting. A bullet lodged behind Kennedy's ear. On December 31st, 1963, Mrs. Frances Hernandez, residence 1917 Annex, Dallas, Texas, was re-interviewed in her place of employment, McKell Sportswear Company, second floor of the Daltex Building, 501 Elm Street. Mrs. Hernandez advised that she recalls it was raining the day before President John F. Kennedy was to come to Dallas, and that she and two of her fellow workers, a Mrs. Henrietta Vargas and Mrs. Josephine Salinas, were leaving their parking lot west of the Schoolbook Depository Building. They had to stop because a 55 or 56 Buick was in the exitway, and she noticed two men standing behind the Buick. The older man reached into the trunk of the car and handed a rifle to the younger man. She said she particularly noticed this activity since it reminded her of a man working at McKell Sportswear who had gone deer hunting, and she thought these men were going to do the same thing. She only saw the back of the older man's head and can only say the younger man was rather slim. She cannot describe whether either of these two men as being identical to Lee Harvey Oswald or Jack Ruby, and thought of the above incident only after the president was assassinated. Said she and her friends were frightened and reluctant to become involved and were very excited and confused for some time. But now that she has had time to think about this, she is certain of the above facts. Also, on December 31st, 1963, Mrs. Henrietta Vargas, residence 511 Capitol Street, Dallas, Texas, was interviewed at her place of employment, McKell Sportswear, at 501 Elm Street. Vargas advised that she and two of her fellow workers, Mrs. Frances Hernandez and Mrs. Josephine Salinas, were leaving their parking lot behind the Schoolbook Depository Building when they observed two men standing near a light-colored automobile, make unknown. She said that she cannot recall whether this was the Tuesday or the Thursday before Kennedy came to Dallas and was assassinated, but she does recall that it was raining at the time. Mrs. Vargas said that she noticed the older man took a rifle out of the trunk of his car and gave it to the younger man, who walked toward the railroad track west of the Schoolbook Depository Building. She did not see the face of the younger man and cannot describe him, and she does not recall his getting into the automobile. She did not see the face of the older man, only the back of his head, and she has no idea who he was. She said she could not identify either man as Oswald or Ruby, since she did not see their faces. She recalls the older man was a medium height and build, and the younger man appeared to be rather slim. And also on December 31st, Mrs. Josephine Salinas, residence 13740 Birch Lawn, Dallas, Texas, was interviewed at her place of employment, McKell Sportswear Company, in the Dowtex building, 501 Elm Street. Mrs. Salinas advised the day before President Kennedy was killed, she and two of her fellow workers, Mrs. Henrietta Vargas and Mrs. Frances Hernandez, were leaving the parking lot west of the school book depository building. She recalls it was raining and wondered whether the president would be able to be seen in the parade scheduled for the next day, and noticed there were two men standing near the rear of a 55 or 56 Buick, which was blocking the exit road. The older man took a rifle out of the trunk of the car and gave it to the younger man. She did not see the face of the older man since she could only observe him from the back and could not describe him further. The younger man, who was of slender build, walked away from the Buick carrying the rifle, but she did not see where he went or whether he got into another vehicle. Mrs. Salinas advised she cannot describe either of these two men she observed as being identical to Lee Harvey Oswald or Jack Ruby. Interesting. Interesting. Here's a weird one. On November 25th, 1963, this is a U.S. Secret Service document from Special Agent William H. Patterson in Dallas. Information obtained at the Dallas office. During the interview of the subject's wife, she advised that the FBI had contacted her about the location of her husband about 10 days prior to the assassination. Now, of course, we're talking about Marina Oswald here, folks. And she had told them that her husband worked in the building from which the president was killed. She also stated that she had been interviewed in October and gave the same basic information to the FBI. While I was at the police station, I engaged an FBI agent in a conversation and found out that he was on the subversive desk. He stated that Oswald had contacted two known subversive agents 15 days before the shooting, but the entire information was top secret and he cannot tell us anymore. But he felt sure that the file would be turned over to our chief. The wife also advised that she had seen the rifle that was used in the shooting at her home about 3 weeks before the shooting. She advised that she was a Castro supporter, and from the interview, it was felt that she is still a hardcore communist. He stated he had never mentioned killing the president, but would not mention anything about shooting Connolly. He stated she did not know the man that killed her husband. It was felt by the interviewer that she was not telling the truth and still believed in communism. Interesting. Very freaking interesting. Okay. We got an FBI document here now, folks. And this is to the director and special agents in charge, Dallas and Las Vegas, from Special Agent in charge, Phoenix. Robert J. Kaye, that's Kaye, located and interviewed this date at Tucson, Arizona, where he resides, 2116 East 17th Street, and is presently employed as a mechanic by Falcon Automatic of Campbell Avenue, Tucson. No signed statement furnished by Kaye, since he advised he has very limited reading and writing ability. He's illiterate, folks. Kaye repeats story of his meeting at Denver, Colorado, early October 63, with a man who identified himself as Lee, last name unknown. Stated that he saw a picture of Oswald on television in El Paso the day following President Kennedy's assassination. Kay believes that Oswald is identical with the man he met named Lee, but admits he cannot be absolutely certain since he saw Lee only briefly twice on the date of meeting in Denver. Lee gave Kay $300 in $50 and $20 bills as traveling expenses to go to Mexico City and obtain a package from an unknown man. Kay was to return this package to Lee in Amarillo, Texas, when Lee would then give Kay $3,000 for completion of the mission. Lee alleged to have given Kay a small calendar on which dates were marked. Kay advises he was to pick up package in Mexico City on Saturday in November, date not recalled, and was to deliver the package to Lee, also on Saturday about 2 weeks later in Amarillo. Lee also gave Kay a small slip of paper on which was drawn a map, which Kay was to follow in order to meet the unknown man in Mexico City. Kay advises he gave the map and calendar to the Secret Service man in El Paso, Texas, and Kay made the trip to Mexico City but failed to meet the man or obtain a package for Lee. He returned eventually to El Paso and then to Tucson, but did not go to Amarillo and did not again see Lee. Kay, agreeable to a polygraph test if such desired. Kay was fingerprinted and photographed, advises he intends to remain in Tucson as long as he is employed there. So these are pretty scathing accusations by Robert Kay. So next up, we have a Secret Service document that details the investigation. Because remember, Kay said that he gave what Oswald gave him to Secret Service in El Paso. So what do they have to say? This report originated when Robert Kay appeared in the El Paso office with the following information. Robert Kay, a.k.a. Roman Sokolowski, was born 12/25/35 in Poland, white male, 5'2", 131, brown hair, blue eyes, wears glasses, walks with a limp because right leg is shorter than the other. Exhibited Colorado driver's license number H1434942 and gave his wife's name as Alice Kay, born Hardy, age 26. Together they have four children. Daughters Bobby Lynn, 6.5, Sandy, 3, sons Mikey, 4.5, and Danny, 2. Kay said he lives at 95 South Ogden, Denver, Colorado, and works as a mechanic in a garage at the rear of his house with one Glenn Jenkins, but he lives 3 hours away. But his number is 722-3416. Kay could not recall his naturalization number, but said his papers were at his residence in Denver. He furnished the following information. American soldiers found him in Innsbruck, Austria in 1944 when he was working for the Germans at the age of 9 or 10. He said he was Polish-Jewish background, which resulted in his parents being killed by the Germans in a camp near Mannheim, Germany. He said that after the death of his parents as a small child, he traveled back and forth across the various European frontiers looking for Americans, and that he has been shot 9 times. He claims to have visited Russia in 1943 and was a mascot to Field Marshal Rommel in 1942. He claims to speak English, Polish, German, Hungarian, and said he understands Russian and a little Italian. He said he was found in Innsbruck by Sergeant Edward Klanowski, who was his sponsor for U.S. citizenship. He further states, Jesus Christ, that in 1945 in England, he was informed by the U.S. consul that President Truman had signed his naturalization papers, resulting in his entering the United States at Portland, Maine, where he was met by Sergeant Klanowski. Kay claims to have been on the Ed Sullivan Show and various other TV shows where his life story has been told. Robert Kay furnished the following information concerning Lee Harvey Oswald. He said that he, Kay, is employed as a mechanic in Denver, as stated above, and that sometime around the 1st of October, 63, he was in the Greyhound bus depot in Denver at the coffee counter when he was approached by a man who identified himself as Lee. This Lee drank coffee with him and said he recognized him from being on TV and that he also has been to Russia. Kay said that he explained to Lee that he was working and that he was presently en route to make a service call on a jukebox machine at the Tower Building in Denver. He said Lee accompanied him in his car while he went to the Tower Building and waited in the car while he made the repair. Kay stated that when he returned to the car, they talked for about an hour, during which time Kay explained that his business was going broke. He said Lee asked him how he would like to make $3,000 by doing the following act. He asked Kay to meet a man named Francis, who was 6'4", skinny, and with a long nose in Mexico City, and pick up some papers and return with the papers to the United States. Kay said he agreed and was given $100 in expense money. They then took 4 pictures in the photo machine in the Greyhound bus station of Denver, which Lee kept. Kay was to depart El Paso, Texas, or Juarez, Mexico on October 29, 1963, and go to the museum in Mexico City, which was the former home of a Mexican president, and visit the bathroom in the middle of the second floor of the museum, where he would be contacted by the above-named Francis, who would recognize him from the photo. Francis would give him some paperwork and another $1,500. Kay was supposed to go from Mexico to Amarillo by the following route: Mexico City to Juarez on one bus ticket, walk across the bridge and buy a bus ticket from El Paso to Amarillo, and he would be met in Amarillo on November the 11th, 1963 by someone who would recognize him from the pictures. When he turned over the papers obtained from Francis in Mexico City to the man in Amarillo, he would be paid the remaining $1,500. Kay said that when he arrived in Mexico City, he hired a guide to take him to the museum, and while at the museum, he hung around the men's room on the second floor all afternoon, but was never contacted by this Francis person. He said he departed Mexico City for Juarez, Mexico on November the 3rd, 1963, where he remained until this morning. Kay stated that on Saturday, November 23rd, in the Juarez newspapers, he saw a photo of the assassin and recognized this man as the Lee that he had met. He said he became frightened, but finally decided that he had to return to his family and report the information. He said he had not furnished this information to any other agency, and that upon leaving the El Paso office, he was returning to his residence in Denver, where he would be available for an interview. Case closed. El Paso with the submission of this report. Special Agent Phillips was telephonically notified on the contents of this MR. In subsequent LD phone conversation with Phillips, He requested that Denver conduct background information investigation on Robert K., also known as Roman Sokolowski, 95 South Ogden, Denver, to determine the validity of his background and possibly his story. Robert K. should be re-interviewed for additional information. No record PRS on Robert K. Attached temporary visa, Estados Unidos Mexicanos, Secretary de Gobernación Original, issued to Robert J. K., Juarez, Mexico, on October 28, 1963. Wow. So what the hell does that all mean? I have no earthly idea. No earthly idea. So the guy was illiterate, couldn't read or write, English at least, but apparently knew 6 or 7 different languages, had this fantastical background. 5 foot nothing, gimped up leg, shot 9 times, made his way to America, personally signed naturalization papers from President Truman, was on the Ed Sullivan Show, was a mechanic in the garage in his house where he worked with a guy who, for whatever reason, drove 3 hours to work every day and back. He comes up with this fantastical story about meeting Ali, talking to the guy, having him come with him on a repair call, leaving this person that you just met at the Greyhound bus station in your car while you go fix a jukebox, and then accepting this very odd offer. Now, they do acknowledge that this Robert K. fellow was in Mexico City on October 28th, 1963. They have his visa from that time. So is his story true? I don't know. It's very, very odd, folks. Very odd. Interesting. Next up, FBI. FBI document dated December 14th, 1963. Marion Miharg advised. He resides at 2102 Village Way, Dallas, Texas, with his sister, Mrs. Loretta Avery. He was interviewed on the premises of the Cooperative Delivery Service at 410 South Good Latimer Expressway, where he is temporarily employed as a mechanic. He was asked to see if he is the same man who furnished information to Special Agent Alfred Ellington on December 2nd, 63, concerning observing certain events take place on the day of Kennedy's assassination in the vicinity of the School Book Depository building. He stated that he did talk to Mr. Ellington and furnished him with certain information. Mr. Miharg was advised at this time that to knowingly furnish false information to federal officers is a violation of federal law. He was advised that he did not have to make a statement or answer questions, and that any statement made by him or questions answered could be used against him in a court of law. He was advised of his right to seek legal counsel before answering questions. He was advised again that if he now furnished information which is false and which he knew to be false, he could be prosecuted. Miharg was then asked if he advised Special Agent Alfred Ellington on December 2nd as follows. Quote, that within a matter of minutes after the president was shot, he observed a man come out of the Texas School Book Depository building, jump off the loading dock at the rear of the building, run across Houston Street and get into a 56 green and white Chevy station wagon. And that he further observed the license number on this vehicle and believes the first four digits were PW17. He was further asked, did his former wife not own a 56 green and white Chevy station wagon with 63 Texas license plates, PW1784? Miharg stated he did furnish Ellington this information and advised that he's worried about his two boys who are in the custody of his former wife, Mildred, the bitch, and is afraid she might have gotten mixed up in this affair. He stated he is sure he observed a 56 green and white Chevy station wagon on Houston Street with Texas license starting with PW or PB or PF or something, and was afraid it was her. At this time, Miharg was asked if he made anonymous phone calls to the Dallas office of the FBI stating that license number PW1784 is a lead in this case. He stated that he did make the anonymous calls and also called the Texas Highway Patrol. Miharg stated that he did this as he was worried about his two sons and was afraid his wife might be mixed up in some way. At this time, Miharg stated he did not mean to furnish false information and again repeated that he is worried about his two boys. He does not know where his former wife Mildred is and wants to find her and his two boys. Oh, Mr. Mihargi. You can't make this shit up, folks. So he's trying to implicate his ex-wife in the assassination of the president. You got to love it. You got to love it. All right, so that's it for the bits and pieces, the crumbs of the assassination. Let's get into eyewitness Malcolm Summers and what he saw and what he heard on November 22nd, 1963. I love the way this guy talks. You're going to love it too. Check this dude out. Here we go.
Okay, and you're still in business.
I'm in business, and I'll be going back to work today when this interview's out. But I've been in business 41 years. Yeah, and then the first thing I heard was, I thought was a firecracker, the first shot. And I have a hard time about that yet today, because the FBI Secret Service people that was on the back of that car, they looked down at the ground, and then the third was just about where I was at, rung out. And the first shot and the second shot was fairly close. And then the second and third was likewise. There wasn't much difference in any of the timings there. And of course, I standing beside the curb there, I saw Kennedy get hit. I heard Connolly say, are they going to kill us all or shoot us all? I'm not sure which one on that deal. And then
Now, real quick, before we go on, some important points to note so far. Okay. Everybody always says that the first shot sounded like a firecracker and that people thought that it was a firecracker. And here he's stating that even the Secret Service agents were looking on the ground. Now, maybe this is indicative of a missed shot, bullet striking the street, something of that nature. Or maybe it was a firework. Who the hell knows? But it's interesting. Now, this guy, Summers, was close enough to hear people in the car speak. Okay? He's sitting here telling you, he heard Connolly say, oh my God, they're going to kill us all. All right, let's continue with Malcolm Summers.
I heard Jackie Kennedy scream out, oh God, no, no, no. And it was a shrill, it was very sad to hear that, if you think back. It was just eerie. And I mean, that's the way she said, oh God, no, no. And then there was a motorcycle cop right coming along on the side, leading the caravan there, the car. And he laid down his bike right in front of me and looked straight in my direction. And looked like he's going to pull his gun. Well, but he's looking at me, and I knew he wasn't looking at me, but I mean in my direction. I thought, well, somebody behind me was doing the firing. And because I thought that, well, I fell down, I hit the ground, I kind of stayed on my hand somewhat, where I could still see in the car, but not, be standing up. And then he jumped back on his bike, and then he took off along with a car and everything. I guess it was his job to get to the hospital with him, and he certainly did. Well, I stayed there just a few minutes, a few seconds, I'll put it that way, until all the commotion went by, other cars, and a lot of screaming, a lot of going on. And then from that point,
Right. So we have the moment of the shots. We have Summers saying that one of the motorcycle cops in the motorcade stopped his bike, put it down on his side, looked at him like he was going to draw his gun at him or something, and then get back on his motorcycle and head off to Parkland. Now, we also have Summers saying that he got down, kind of crouched down a little bit, maybe on one hand, because I guess he was scared of getting shot, which is understandable. So let's continue.
Lots of people was running around, running down toward the racetrack, railroad track down there. And I, again, figured power of suggestion. I thought, well, everybody, they saw him and they catching him down there. So I immediately ran across the street too, and I was going to go down there and see him catch him, and I hope hang him, whatever, because I was that mad because I saw the blood and all that. And but when I ran across the street, I was stopped by a guy that Al Maddox told you about. It was similar, we think, but when we put it together. And he was dressed. He was about 5'10", 6 foot, well dressed, and had a tie and a coat over his arm. Well, he also had a hat on. So he had a gun under his coat that only the barrel showed through, that you couldn't, it wasn't uncovered. It was just because I was running straight at it, I could see the barrel. That's the only reason I guess I saw it. But I was not the only one running across that street. It was other people, doing the right and the left. And he said, you better not come up here. You could get shot. And I immediately did not want to argue with him because he looked like a man of authority. I thought he was maybe a detective or FBI man. And I had seen these stories where they go around and protect him always. And I just assumed that was one of them, because I wasn't going to argue with him about coming up here, yes I am, or anything like that,
All right, now let's stop again. So, we have, folks, video of the person that Malcolm Summers encountered on the grassy knoll, or at least his way up to the grassy knoll. We do have video of a well-dressed man with a suit, tie, hat on, with a coat over his arm. And here he's telling you that concealed under that coat, Summers can see the barrel of a gun. And he is told by this man and other people not to come up on the knoll because they could get shot. And Summers, in his mind, is thinking that this guy is a man of authority. He could be a cop. He could be FBI, or he could be Secret Service, but he's definitely, he knows that the president travels with protection. And it's interesting that, he's telling us this, and we have this guy on video. In fact, I think I made it. We just talked about this stuff. I made it the cover photo for one of the most recent episodes. The image of this guy with a coat over his arm well dressed behind the knoll, hat, suit, and he's telling us he's got a gun underneath that jacket. So let's continue.
So I immediately, after he wouldn't let me go on down there, well, then I immediately turned around and went back over to the postal annex. And everyone in there, I told them about what happened. And when I say everyone, there's 3 or 4 of them. They were laughing at me because I was so white and so scared and everything. And I grabbed the phone and tell my wife to turn on the TV and see what happened. And because all these guys were laughing so loud, when I was talking to her, she said, well, okay, what's the joke? And I said, listen, it is not a joke. This is for real. Turn on the TV. And so she did. So when I was leaving the post office there, and this was over a period of time, I'm going to say 20 to 30 minutes after all of it left. Well, when I was leaving, I noticed it was 3 Spanish-looking guys jumped in their car, and they was leaving from the front of the post office where they were parked. Jumped in their car, and they headed toward Oak Cliff, which was Houston Street.
All right, now let me stop there again. So for some reason, Malcolm Summers, he didn't work at the postal annex, what we call the post office, over there on the corner of Houston. But that's where he went to use the phone to call his wife. Apparently he had buddies that worked there who were laughing at him and didn't believe what he was saying. And that on his way out of there, he sees 3 Latino men, Mexicans he calls them, but of course could be Cuban, Puerto Rican, Mexican, Latino in origin, hop in this car and tear ass across the Houston Street Viaduct. Okay. Now we know from eyewitness testimony that shortly after the assassination, J.D. Tippit was sitting at the Good Luck Oil Company gas station on the other side of the viaduct, waiting in his vehicle. All right, let's proceed.
I didn't think anything about it at the time, but for sure. And it put it out of my mind, really. And then I went on, I told my wife, I said, look, turn on TV. I said, I'm coming home. I want to see all this. And so I immediately went home, and where I lived was 405 West 12th Street, East 12th Street. And by the time I got there, and this must have been a time of 30 to 45 minutes maybe, and that whole area was full of squad cars. Well, I did not know the reason why they was all full of squad car, that area.
All right, so after he calls his wife, he leaves the post office, and he heads unknowingly in the direction of the murder of J.D. Tippit, folks. Now, in Summers' own estimation, it was about 15 or 20 minutes from the time of the assassination until the time he left the postal annex to go home. So now we're roughly up to 12:50-ish. Say 12:50, 12:55. Okay, he's on his way home. J.D. Tippit is murdered at the intersection of 10th and Jefferson. And he lives on East 12th Street, just 2 blocks away from where J.D. Tippit is killed. Now, let's continue.
And I'm talking about 15 or 20, it appeared to be. I thought they had a gunman cornered out there somewhere. Well, the Tippett was shot in the 400 block of East 10th Street. And that was only 2 blocks from where I lived and went over there. And so it was still a bunch of excitement and a lot of things going on. And then they didn't find him when I saw him, because later on they found him at the Texas Theater over there. So I run back to my house. And you know, it was just horrible. I began to feel bad. I began to be almost sick because
All right, let's stop again. So the point I was trying to make is he estimates 15, 20, 25 minutes after the shots is when he's on his way home. Now, if he's leaving the postal annex at 12:50 or 12:55 and he's driving, he's going to arrive home somewhere around 1:05, roughly 1:05 to 1:10, maybe sooner. And at this point, Tippett is already shot and police are already on the scene, folks. Let's continue.
it happened in Dallas. There again, when I said I was the Dallas side. And I watched TV, I guess, practically all night long about it and listened to everything I could. So,
did your work put you in contact with people from outside of Dallas or outside of Texas?
well, it does. Yes, it did. Yeah.
And what were you hearing from those people?
Well, only, I guess, if you anything from out of town, I don't recall hearing anything particular other than I know when Adlai Stevenson was here just a little bit before that they some Dallas people, or maybe someone claiming to be Dallas people, insulted him, spit on him, and hit him with a sign, and then that's one of the things other people in the newspaper and everything picked up about Dallas was a hate town. Well, Dallas was not a hate town. And it's still not, but that's what they was picking up on because of those incidents, and then Kennedy getting shot. And I certainly, resented it to a great degree. And I can't remember people, anything, certainly over the past few months that he was running for an election, we're talking about him being Catholic and all that. It was just something that was always, in my opinion, it was just a nod, just keep them voting for him.
All right, let's see if we can clarify some things about what you saw when the assassination happened.
All right.
Can you explain better about the shooting itself? I mean, you heard 3 shots?
I heard 3 shots.
Not 4, not 2?
No, 3 shots, yeah.
You're pretty certain of that?
I'm certain.
Okay. And how were they spaced?
I'd say the first one was it sounded like a firecracker. Well, and then if you guess the time, I don't know how to say how many seconds, but the second one and third one was the closest together of all. And that was where when Connolly said they're going to shoot us all or kill us all, well, that's when I thought it was more than one person involved for sure, because he said they. And certainly it sounded like they with that many shots.
I think in your earlier description, I think you said that the first 2 shots were closer together.
Well, no, I misstated that really because it was the second and third. I misstated that, a little bit nervous.
Tell you what, I don't know if you've seen the film. One of the other witnesses was asked to do this. Can you kind of knock on the table, that kind of thing, to tell us how to give an impression of how these shots were spaced out?
Yeah. I'd say like that, and then like that. Okay. I would say that was basically what, vivid to me.
And did you have any idea where they were coming from?
No, I had no idea, because I didn't have time to think about an idea. The only thing it was because that cop come off his bike there, suggested that the guy was behind me. Now, I had a lot of people ask me, said, you were there about 5 minutes ahead of time. Could you have looked up and seen that 6th floor window? And I said, yeah, I certainly could have. And I said, if I'd have seen somebody up there with a shotgun, a rifle, I would have not thought a second about it. They wouldn't know if I would have hollered or I notified somebody. I said, absolutely not, because I've read where the FBI guards the president on every route he takes, and they on top of buildings and places like that. protected him. And I said, that would have been exactly what I thought, even if I'd have looked up and seen someone in that 6'4" window. I would not said anything, not because of fear or anything, it's just because I thought it was supposed to be.
But your initial reaction then was you really didn't know where the shots were coming from?
No, I certainly didn't.
When you ran across the street, let's see, you've seen the Zapruder film of the assassination.
I have seen it.
Okay.
I mean,
you were almost directly in front of him. You were down a little farther, but you were almost directly in front of him. When you ran across the street, did you run straight or to the left or to the right?
To the right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how far did you go before you ran into this guy that you were talking to?
Well, this person, he was standing probably about 5 to 10 feet from the street. It goes by in front of the school book depository where everybody was running, and the sidewalk of the school book depository. From the top of the knoll, he was standing probably 3 to 5 feet away from that particular spot.
Oh, okay. Let's see if we can pinpoint this a little better. I know you've been back to the plaza many times, and you know about where Zapruder stood.
Yes.
How close to where Zapruder was did you meet this man?
I would say, just in distance, I'd say 50 foot.
50 feet.
40 to 50 feet.
40 to 50 feet to the right as you look at it.
It would have been to his left, Zapruder's.
Zapruder's left?
His left, to my right.
Okay. And you saw the barrel of a gun?
Sticking out from under that coat. I mean, just because the coat covered it up, it wasn't sticking out. Retract that. It was just under there, because if you, I never really tried it, but if you hold your coat over your arm and you got a gun in it, well, then it doesn't droop over the gun or anything. It was just even or flush with the gun. And
this was a white guy?
Yes.
Okay.
Very well groomed guy.
Glasses, mustache?
No, he didn't have any glasses. No mustache.
Okay. And he told you what?
He said, y'all better not come up here. You can get shot or killed. One of the statement like that. And which one? Because he was so excited and you revved up there, you wasn't listening to nothing except don't come up here. And, and you just put that with that man was authority to say don't come up here. Well, I didn't think anything about anyone else would, say you can't come up here. Like you, for instance, I would have ignored you or someone like that. And that's why I paid attention to this person.
Did you see him talking to anyone else?
I did not see him talking to anyone else, because by then I did want to turn around and go on back over there and call my wife real quick and get her on the phone, see the events as they were happening. And that was my reason why I didn't linger around to go longer or just wait and see what happened, because I wanted to get back over there real quick.
Does this guy have a hat on?
Yes, he had a hat on.
What kind of hat?
Stetson, I guess, one of them just regular brim hats. Not a wide brim hat, just a regular dress hat that I'd call it. Certainly wasn't a Texas hat or anything of that sort, but it was just a dress hat that people wore. And he was a well-groomed person. I mean, he he's not the normal person that would have went to see prayed unless they happened to step out of their building or something like that. That they was in their office, they wouldn't step out here and get closer view.
So he gave you the impression that he was an authority of some type?
Yes, sir. And that's exactly what he says. You don't come up here. Well, you tell me, the same way or anywhere else. Don't come in here or don't come there.
And how long after the shooting did this happen?
I'd say 3 minutes, however long it took them the rest of the procession to clear out, where I didn't want to run across the street where they were still trying to get out of here and get to the hospital. Now, I don't remember how many cars were behind it, or how many more motorcycles, but I do know that it was a few minutes before they all cleared out. And then I do know that the car itself that Kennedy was in, it hesitated and stopped there for a second or two. And I saw the Secret Service man run up there, and he slipped on the back bumper. At the time, I did not know he was slipping on that back bumper, because I thought he was just trying to dive in the car. But he wasn't trying to dive, and that's where they saw Jackie Kennedy reach for him. And I've heard some people say she was trying to get out of there. That's not so at all.
So after this guy told you to not come up there, you just turned around and didn't, I mean, and you crossed the street again, I guess.
I went back across the street,
back to where you were.
Yeah, I went back across the street and then another street on, and the third street over there to get back to the postal annex.
Okay. Was there anything about the gun that you remember, like the color of the barrel? Or?
No, I could not see a barrel, except I described it to the sheriff's department over here later when I went over there to give his statement, and they asked me what did the muzzle look like. Well, I didn't know that much about guns, period. I was shot up the rifle, 22 or something like that. But when I described the barrel, it said it would sound like an automatic, and that's what I presumed it was, because I didn't see the side or back of it or anything, just a barrel.
Okay, your car, from one of the other accounts of your actions, my understanding is that your car was on Commerce Street, but it was the Commerce Street extension right next to the Terminal Annex building.
Well,
the little side street.
Well, okay, my car, it is a little side street. Drives off of Houston Street to go behind the post office, postal annex. They have a dock back there where you back up and unload your mail. Now, that was where it was. It was parked right behind that post office on that little street you have to go down there to get to.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, once you got off the phone with your wife and explained to her what had happened and convincing your co-workers that Kennedy really had been shot, you then wanted to head back to Oak Cliff.
Absolutely.
So you drove along that little side road and made a right onto Houston Street.
That's exactly right.
And that's when these three Hispanic guys...
Right, they were right at the curb where I was making my right at. That's where they were parked.
Okay.
Right at probably the first car.
And did they go around your left side or your right side?
No, I hadn't got out there yet. They pulled out ahead of me before I made my turn.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yes.
And there was something about the way they did that?
Well, they were in a hurry, yes, and they left at a great speed, fast speed. I didn't think anything about it. I didn't necessarily think anything about it. But they headed in the same direction I was going, and that didn't mean anything either, except later on when all these other things surfaced about where Ruby lived and where Oswald lived, and that was in that direction.
Okay. Speaking of where Ruby lived in that area in Oak Cliff, did you hear any stories in the weeks and months following the assassination that made you wonder about some of the events that day?
Well, I certainly heard a bunch of stories, and then of course a lot of people were speculating about Oswald was at home, and he was walking in the direction where he did wind up over at 10th Street. That is kind of south of where he lived, southeast, I guess. And certainly I associated that with why he was walking over there, and still is a question, I think, why he was walking over there. And then Ruby lived in that direction also, and I associated those things with him because they said, well, he was headed this way toward Ruby's house. Well, it made sense he could have been.
Well, of your friends and neighbors in that part of town, did any of them know any of the people involved in this story anywhere?
No, not in any way did any of them know.
Okay.
Not at all. I own a duplex over there, and that was just where I lived.
Okay. You gave a statement to the sheriff's department?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Was that the only time you were interviewed by any of the official investigators?
No, the Secret Service came out to my shop and interviewed me on 2 different occasions.
Okay. Have you seen those reports?
I did see the report, or I was told how they were. The first, it was about 3 of them came the first time. He interviewed me, and they heard everything I just now told you about the fellow stopped me and all of that. And I told them about the 3 fellas that left the curb there in such a hurry. And then they said, well, okay. I told them it looked like a FBI guy, Secret Service, or a local city detective. You know, that's when they dressed like that. And I said, that's who I assumed that was. And then they said, okay, we'll take a report and we'll get back with you. Well, I'd say 2 months later, I was wondering why they didn't call me sooner or whatever, but about 2 months later, they told me that they did not have FBI, man, Secret Service, or a city detective was in that vicinity where this guy stopped me. So therefore, they basically told me I didn't see anything, because they said they didn't have anybody there. And my statement, well, that's what you say. Well, that's fine. I don't need to argue about it. I have no point to prove.
Did you ever have the feeling that they tried to get you to change your story or to not talk about what you had seen?
I don't really guess that they did. I really don't know. I know I was disappointed when they said they didn't have anybody there. And I knew I saw someone there. I guess I was certainly, well, dumb or whatever, because they said he didn't have anybody there. It just didn't make sense at that time.
Okay. In recent years, they're trying to pull you into this story through this James Files fellow. You're familiar with this James Files story?
Yes, I am.
Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, I know I had someone come out from one of the radio stations, and this one could have been Houston, a TV station, or it could have been Houston, it could have been Florida, it could have been one of them. They set up a time they could come out there and interview me and have me on camera and everything. And they showed me the pictures. I remember that story, talking to you one time before about that one. But they showed me, well, after a little bit of conversation, we was on camera and everything, they showed me his picture, said this guy, said he's the assassin. And they said, does he look like the guy you saw up there? I said, no way does that guy look like the guy I saw up there. And they said, well, he said he did it. I said, well, then they also told me he was serving life term for killing a policeman somewhere up in Illinois, I think. And I said, no way. And then this one guy was persistently saying, well, if he had on, I said, he's too short, number one. Said if he had on the high and built-up shoes, could he have been the guy? And I said, well, they might have made him taller. And then they said, well, if he had on a shirt and tie and a hat, could he have looked like that guy? I said, well, I guess anything is conceivable, you know, that he could have possibly dressed in that manner. But I got quoted later on that I said I identified him as a possibility. They changed that conceivable, not my meaning at all about James Files. But I do not believe he could have been connected in any way.
Your real meaning then was that this guy in the picture was not the guy that you had run into?
Files was not the guy I run into, certainly, yes.
Okay. We've covered all the things that you have talked about before, and one of the things in doing the research to prepare for the interview, I mean, I've gone back and looked at your stories. I mean, you've told the same story over and over and over again, except for a couple of the things that I just asked you about. So yeah, it's refreshing to hear that. Is there anything else about what you saw and heard in Dealey Plaza that would be of importance to researchers and historians?
Well, except possibly one thing, and I believe I also mentioned to you, I had a lady come up from Houston. She was a sketch artist, and she worked for the Houston police, and she done sketches of people, and she said she'd had high success with the police, the Houston Police Department, of catching rapists and other people. And she wanted to sketch this person that I saw out. And I said, well, I don't see how I can remember that far back now. It's, you know, it's about 25, 30 years after that. She said, well, you'll be surprised what you can remember if you'll let me come and interview you. Well, I set it up for one Saturday when we wasn't busy, one Saturday afternoon. She brought her book and all her pictures, and I'd never been through this, that The pictures had pictures of guys' chin, pictures of their forehead, and pictures of their ears and their noses. And she'd take, well, which nose looks like him? And she'd do it in that way and compile it. And I'm sure y'all familiar with that. But she came up with a picture that was remarkably what I described of the man that stopped me, and then the one that Al Maddox described to you. And also, she gave me, and she had some pictures of some known gangsters that was running the Dallas paper. They was here that day or something, and she marked the resemblance of the one I described and the one that was in the paper, and I still have that. And I think I mentioned it. I think I even showed it to you, did I not?
I've seen the picture. I don't think you showed it to me, but I've seen the picture and I know which one.
Well, and I do believe it's a very good resemblance of that person.
And this was done in what, 1997 or 98, 96?
Oh no, it was done probably 1992 or 3, way back there.
Okay.
Yeah, a long time ago. It's 10 years ago, at least 10.
Okay.
And it was accurate as far as I'm concerned of my description I gave to her.
Okay. Anything else you would like to add to oral history?
No, I'm just happy to come here and put my input there, because I know that I was first 25 years I would not talk to anybody, and that's one of the things about old Jim Marr thing. I didn't want to take the time. And my fear of not taking the time, and from the first day, was I thought the FBI, whoever, wanted you to testify. They could take you, and they could keep you in court for a week or 2 weeks or a month if they needed to, and I could vision my business suffering from that, and that's one of the reasons I wasn't interested in talking again all of this. But then after 25 years, anniversary of my sons, I have to convinced me that Dad said, you're not too busy that you can't talk, and that you can't give a little of your time to this. And that's one of the reasons I'm here today, Mr. West, is because they were exactly right. And that's what I hope to accomplish.
And there you have it, folks. Mr. Malcolm Summers and his testimony. Very interesting stuff from him. To me, a credible eyewitness, and certainly what he experienced that day, and from his vantage point and his experiences, we get a much clearer picture of what he's talking about here. So very, very vital information. So take it for what it's worth. To me, there was somebody on the knoll acting as an authority figure, and it's interesting that Summers saw. Now, he did mention in this interview that he had given a statement to the sheriff's office in which he told him about the barrel of the gun. But interestingly enough, I happen to have his sheriff's department affidavit, and well, I'll just read it to you. Yesterday, November 22nd, 1963, I was standing on the terrace of the small park on Elm Street to watch the president's motorcade. The president's car had just come up in front of me when I heard a shot and saw the president slump down in the car, and I heard Mrs. Kennedy say, "Oh no." Then a second shot, and then I hit the ground as I realized these were shots. Then all the people started running up the terrace away from the president's car, and I got up and started running also, not realizing what had happened. In just a few moments, the president's car sped off, and everybody was just running around towards the railroad tracks, and I knew that they had somebody trapped up there. I imagine I stayed there 15 or 20 minutes, and then went over on Houston Street to where I had my truck parked. I had just pulled away from the curb and was headed toward the Houston Street viaduct when an automobile that had 3 men in it pulled away from the curb in a burst of speed, passing me on the right side. which was very dangerous at that point, then got in front of me. And it seemed then, as an afterthought, slowed in a big hurry in front of me, as though realizing they would be conspicuous in speeding. These 3 men were of slender build and seemed to be very excited in talking and motioning to each other. They went across the Houston Street Viaduct, and I turned off at Marcellus Street exit, and they continued on going towards Zang's Boulevard. They were in a 1961 or 62 Chevy sedan, maroon in color. I don't believe I could identify those men, but I do believe I could identify the automobile if I saw it again. Malcolm Summers. Subscribed and sworn to before me on this date, 23rd day of November, AD 1963, by the Notary Public, Dallas County, Texas. Now, noticeably absent from this next day affidavit. Okay. Now, he mentions Kennedy, Mrs. Kennedy saying, oh no. He doesn't mention Connolly saying, my God, they're going to kill us all. Now he's saying about going up to the knoll. He says, I knew that they had probably had somebody trapped up there. I imagine I stayed there 15 or 20 minutes and then went over on Houston Street to where I had my truck parked. Now, in his 6th floor oral history there, he states that it was a couple of minutes before he crossed the street and went up the knoll and encountered this person of authority, and that he immediately was turned away and went back across the street and then back over to the post office, which certainly doesn't jive with this that I stayed there 15 or 20 minutes and then went over to Houston Street where I had my truck parked. He also leaves out the part of going in the post office, telling his co-workers, and phoning his wife. Now, in his oral history, he states that these were Hispanic men, which is also not mentioned in this next day affidavit. He just calls them 3 men of slender build, very excited and talking and motioning to each other. Okay. Now, in his oral history, he also says that as he's waiting there to pull out, okay, these men go in front of him, and then he got in behind them. But on this next day affidavit, okay, he says, I had just pulled away from the curb and was heading toward Houston Street when an automobile that had 3 men in it pulled away from the curb in a burst of speed and passed him on the right side, which is very dangerous at that point. And then they slow down because he thinks maybe they would have been very conspicuous in their speeding. So we do have a lot of inconsistencies in Malcolm Summers' story. And of course, noticeably absent, glaringly absent in this Sheriff's Department affidavit is any mention whatsoever of the grassy knoll encounter with this man, or the fact that anything about the gun under the coat and the barrel that he says he described to the Sheriff's Department in detail. So, where does that leave us? Is Malcolm Summers full of shit? Or did the Sheriff's Department purposely leave out a lot of information? I'll leave that for you to decide. And yes, I just fucked up on hitting the wrong button, but I got the right one now. So that's it for Malcolm Summers in the Potpourri episode. Again, follow along at the Lone Gunman 7 on Twitter, on YouTube. Search for the Lone Gunman Podcast channel. Subscribe and share and like and comment. We might even troll you if you're lucky. And also, make sure you're checking out Quick Hits, a JFK assassination news and notes podcast that I do with my buddy Doug from the Dallas Action Podcast presented by Wall Street Window. Wherever you listen to fine podcasts, including this one. God damn it. Anyway, thanks again, and we'll see you next time, folks. Peace.